Okay. Now, I'm going to write the script. Okay, so whichever letters you struggle with, make sure you make a note of what you see. Now, remember, we always start with an intake of air. It doesn't matter if the letter starts with a connective stroke like the A, you have to find a way to have that intake of air, because that intake of air generates the initial momentum to move the stroke. So I will also, in some instances, I'll write the letter and then I'll also do the intake. So I'm going to do the intake on the A, baseline, X height, cap height. Now, that's just check to see if that window is shut. That's probably a lot slower than you were writing. And I know you're thinking that you are writing smaller, but your tool and my tool are relative to each other. So this tool is writing roughly at the same size you are writing at with a nib. So that's the pace that you're supposed to be working at. So I'm going to write the alphabet out alphabetically. So I've lifted there because it's such a tight turn that if you try to do that little turn there, you'll sort of run out of air. Mark, mark, mark. So I'm using the air here. So obviously I sort of caught that on the end there. Above the X height to the baseline. If this goes on the X height, you end up with the top being too heavy. And of course, in Roman capitals, that line is longer than. So when you look back at the Roman capitals, they really help you to understand why the copperplate letters look the way they look. F always starts below the cap height, and you still need to make a line of universal beauty with a hairline and a hairline, because you want to contain the top of the F in the cap height. I mean, you're allowed to play with a little bit of it there, but if you take that, if you put the line of universal beauty over the 6, the F and the T will be massive. So you just need to be a little bit conscious about that. So here I've stayed inside of the height. whereas what you're practicing is a lot bigger. Stay on the 55. Now, one of the problems with this is because you've done this, there's a tendency to do this. So you come around that curve and this loop pushes you this way. So the way to get around it is to slow down. The slower you take the turn, the easier it will be to get that stroke on the 55. Wow, listen to that. Yeah. I like my eye to have a nice little sort of curl there. So I call this a line of universal beauty curl, as opposed to a line of universal beauty curve. Just get the G on the board quickly so you can compare them. So these are thirds, that's a third below, and I make the head deeper, but I also bring it back on itself. So you really have two letters that are differentiated from each other, both in size. So the curl plus the loop plus the inner curl up here, and that does not curl. So you're really differentiating between them. Okay. So I go from here to here to there to there. And what is this shape? It's the I. So when you're doing the K, you don't really want to do this and that and that, because that doesn't exist in the script. So if you add this into the script, you need to state, incidentally, I have an additional stroke because obviously I think the script is too simple, right? So don't add additional strokes which complicate the script. K, L, remember to keep that in line so that it lines up. M, that also allows you, so I'm just going to throw another M in that I like to play with. And then I come back and up and out. Because obviously, you know, we're learning copperplate to flourish, yes? So M, N, so be conscious of the N, and down and up, and hairline, and press, and hairline. So it's not a straight line. And parallel, O. So look, I'm in the middle of the board, so I realize I'm starting to doubt the height of the line. So I've made a little mark to remind me. O or O. Now, a lot of people do this. If you're going to make 2 strokes on the inside of the O, on the left side of the O, the first stroke is important. The second stroke is a secondary stroke. At no point should this be the same weight as that, because then the O looks really big. It's like when you're doing a flourish, if you do an R, you don't then do a nice big heavy shade on that and then a massive shade on this, only to have that. Because do you see anything on this side? So with the Roman R, this and this and this are important. So if you do a flourish, all of this is non-existent on the Roman R. So the aim is to get the line of universal beauty, this ellipse and that swell stroke to be more definite and more to be primary strokes versus secondary strokes. OP. And remember, and up and down, don't press too hard, fill that bowl, press here. So of course with a brush it's a little bit odd, let me just do this again. And Q. So, couple options. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Now, sixths. So we have 1/6 from the bottom is a space, because if you do it too high, you end up with a 2. You do not end up with a Q. So we also have, like the O, so that might be easier for you to do sometimes, but eventually you want to be able to get to this, because that's your historical cue. R we saw earlier on. S. I like to fill this because it intersects there. So we have a 1/6 and a 1/3, and there's another 1/6 here. So that's your half, that's a 1/6. This is divided by the 55. And you can see how this relates to this. So this is half of the volume of this. So by overlapping them, you sort of tighten up the letter and you give it a little bit more internal balance. So the other S, 6, stay on the 55. So I'm around the 55. So I would lean that just a little bit more. Let me just go front of it. Because the thing that you have to be conscious of, see where this axis is? It's all right, but it's this axis that you have to be conscious of. the axis of this ellipse. Because if it's too upright, the whole thing looks too upright. You might as well be doing a treble clef.
Yeah.
So S, T, remember T is a little bit lower. Funny, it's right by the I. It's T, up and down and out. U, keep the U narrow. A nice deep bowl. Keep it narrow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Even the axis of that ellipse is at 55. Yeah? Let's see, where are we? V, where's this? 1 and 2 and 3. V, hairline, hairline. W, same as the V. Keep it a little bit heavier. WX. So with the X, I put the hairline on the first part of the stroke. So I go X, the reason for that is, if you put the weight on the first big downstroke, you've already deposited ink. Then you come back around. When you come back around, it's harder to not press on the second downstroke because you're already in full flow. You're like, I'm on the downstroke, I'm going to get this, and then you press, and there's already ink there. So you end up with this massive ink, and the previous ink has already released some of the fibers. So by the time you close the nib here, all you're doing is pulling a whole mass of fibers, so you end up with this. And then you panic. And then you go, why did that happen? It happened because you have too much ink. So the other X that I do is this. Which is quite a narrow X. Y is 1 and 3 and 6. Keep it narrow, keep it deep, keep it hairline, just under the baseline, because it's a narrow stroke. It's a thin hairline, and Z is this. Or this. Now, look at this, look at that. Do you see how sympathetic these curves are? This ellipse here is divided in half by that, into a third by that. That space there shows you that this part of the ellipse, its volume is just about a half of the whole ellipse. If you take this around here, and this around here, and this around here, you have a little embryo. So it's always important to look at what's beyond the shape. And in order to do that, you have to follow the last line up and around and down and back to itself. And again, you have to stick to that off a little bit. You have to stick to that 55-degree angle. Right. So, minuscules. Oh my gosh. Really difficult to do with a brush. So we have A, remember, I work with one-to-one, because if you're working one-to-one, I know some people work at different heights. If you're working one-to-one, you know that at the X height there is a kink. If you're working taller than that, then you have to figure out what's happening above there and where the curve is. Now, once you've mastered that, then obviously you can elongate your ascenders and descenders. A, B, down and over and down and back and up and over and down and back and up and up. So remember, the kink is in the ink. D and kink, E and out and cover. And so we'll do a couple Fs. So I'm not going down to the third. And we're going to do this F, back and out and that. And we're going to do another F around the front and up and over and back and down and up and wait and little line and press and wait and down and back and kink and up and over and inhale and exhale slowly. So I've just added in the movement for you to see. From that M to that O, I go all the way up, touch the line, back down. So that's the momentum. So the momentum from the M takes you all the way up, and you little bounce and back up around. Because remember, if you try to do the O from here, what is that ligature? That ligature is not going to join anything. It's just going to be flying. So it's a separate, an additional stroke to the crazy stroke you did on the K. So we do the O, up and over, back and over, press and cover, and reverse comma in the middle third, up at 55. So obviously you know you're joining something there. Little line, spread the nib. So that's one above. So obviously you don't want to take it down to 3 because then it's too long, because it's a constant width stroke. P, 2, so I do this cue, up, comma, release the pressure, straight across, hairline, weight, hairline, up and over, press, along the outside, up, down, and back. So obviously that R cannot connect to the S. So I'm going to redo the first R, and up, press, release, press, in, up at 55. The T is only 1/6 above the X height. You make the T any taller, it looks a little bit odd, and it's too heavy for the script. TU. V. Remember to mark off, mark off, mark off. V, W, X, Y, and Z, and 18th century ampersand, '55, or so tiring. Right, as we're here, 1, 2, and 4. So 4/6. 1, little hairline. 2, 3, little mark. 3 can go below the baseline. 4 is a little bit tricky. Always start with a hairline. That's what gives the script its distinctiveness. 5. So remember, with the 5, start with the little stroke, then do the downstroke, and then go across and a little flick. 6. 6 is always above. Slow and slow and slow and no pressure. Because if you put pressure in there, the 6, which is already so big, looks huge. 7, I do a little flick. I go up and press, release and press. Now my 7 is at 55. 8, up and over, back and down, press, and up and out, and little reverse comma. 9, I tend to use this 9 for Copperplate Script. But I always put extra weight here, unlike the 6, because it's short. Some people like to use this 9. I don't find it works well for the script, but you can also use the Spencerian 9, which is 1, 2, 3, little line, and 9. The only problem with this 9 is it's confused in England and Europe as a failed G. And lots of Americans like it, but British and Europeans do not like it.
No.
So obviously, you also have to deal with French 7, otherwise, you know, they don't know what you're writing. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So a general rule of thumb is the numbers work like the uppercase, work like the minuscules. So the even numbers, 0, which is weight on both sides to differentiate from the 1. 1, 2, 3 goes below the line. 4 goes above the line. 5 below, 6 above, 7 below, 8 above, 9 below, and 0, an X height as you've seen at the beginning. Okay? Punctuation. So we have full stop, comma, or like this. 1, because the nib will spread, so you can get a little dot. Press and pull. 1 and 2 and 3. Or little line, weight, and down, and so you get your, so you have 2 ways to do the exclamation mark. The question mark's a little bit problematic because you have to sort of go, you have to use momentum to make the question mark. So you have to go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Or you can do this and press here and release and press again. It's a little bit difficult to do with a brush, obviously. Am I missing anything? Diacritical marks. I'm kidding. All right. So so that gives you a sort of, and you are also able to see the rhythm of the writing, which is really important. So look at this mess I've made on my board. Fortunately, it's just water. So the rhythm of the writing, I was going to check my phone, but it's over there. The rhythm of the writing is really critical, you know, and you know, when you're sitting, you can use your feet. So little bounce through the body, other leg. So you're just moving your whole body ever so gently. Little rocking motion, and 1 and 2 and 3. You're not, you know, obviously you're not doing that because obviously you're going to disturb the writing, but that little rocking motion will help you to gain a little bit of momentum. Remember, the momentum is the key. If you can't get the momentum, then the letter will fail just as you're doing that big long stroke because you run out of steam. So just be really careful with it, okay? So let's get some writing done. One of the things I would suggest you do is, I think we're in our last hour. One of the things I would suggest you do is 4:30, right, so we have half an hour. Pick a letter that you're really struggling with, because that's usually a good way to make a breakthrough. Because once we sort that letter out, you start to feel better about the other letters. So pick an uppercase letter, a majuscule, and pick a minuscule, okay? Wow, absolutely wiped now. Okay, so I hope that's helped some of you with your understanding of Copperplate Script. I'm going to get back to the class. We have half an hour, and the students have done wonderfully because they've understood a skeletal structure as well as working with a nib, which is really helpful. We've tried 2 different nibs. We've done the Gillot 404 just for a little bit of rigidity while we learn the hairline and the line of universal beauty, the connected stroke at 50 and the line of universal beauty at 55 interaction. And then we've moved to a Gillot 170 which is a great nib to work with. A little bit flexible, but not as flexible as the 303. So hope that helps, and have a good weekend. Bye bye.